Hello, I'm Donna Phillips from Parrot Wood Memorial Library, and we were blessed to get a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the American Library Association. This grant is paying for us to document the history of polio, and we have a polio survivor here that's going to tell us her story, and we hope you learned something from this. Miss Ginger Spradlin here will be doing the interview, and we hope you enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Ginger, and this is Miss Betty Miller, and she is a survivor of polio. So we want to thank you so much for being willing to do this for us today. Where were you, and how old were you when you got polio?
I was living in Knox County. I was 3 years old.
Do you have any idea where the polio came from, what source that you got it from?
No.
Okay.
We were pretty much on a farm in the country, so I don't know.
Okay, did anyone else in the community at that time have polio? Like, was there a whole little cluster of polio victims, or were you the only one?
I was the only one that I know about.
Okay. What was the first symptoms that you had of polio that let you know something was wrong?
From what my mother told me, I had a fever, and she took me to our family doctor, and he referred her to take me to a pediatrician in Knoxville who diagnosed me.
So then the good thing is you got diagnosed right away. We've interviewed several other people that said maybe they didn't get diagnosed at all because the local doctor thought they had the flu or something. And I know one man told us that his football coach that fall when he went back to school was actually the one that sent him to Vanderbilt because they lived out in the Nashville area to refer him. So he actually finally got some treatment, but it was several months after he had it. So then you benefited by getting diagnosed right away. What treatments did they prescribe for you?
I know that immediately I don't know any of the history of it. I know that my mother was later visited by a public health nurse. She was taught exercises to give me, and my doctor in the country had sent me to a pediatrician in Knoxville. So that was the official diagnosis.
Okay. I know we've read about the Sister Kenny treatments with the hot blankets and things, or maybe I should say almost scalding blankets from what they said because they took them right out of a pressure cooker, is my understanding. But that they were putting those like on your affected parts, your legs or your arms. Did you have any of that?
No, I never heard my mother talk about any kind of treatment like that.
Okay, it's just that you had the exercises later. Okay. Well, describe your recovery process. Like, what part or parts of your body was most affected? That kind of thing.
I wasn't walking. Because my mother often said that one of her concerns was that I might not walk by the time I was 6 years old, and she was looking forward to me being in school.
Right.
And sometime between 3 and 6, she did a lot of things, a tricycle and different things to get me exercise so I could walk. And I was walking pretty well when I was 6.
Okay, so then basically this took you from 3 to 6 to get partially recovered so that you could start walking and go to school with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's something probably a lot of our listeners don't understand when you say start school at 6 because our students today start so early.
Yeah.
A lot of them are in school by 4 years old, but back when you and I went to school, 6 was when we went, wasn't it?
First grade.
Right, we didn't have kindergarten, we didn't have pre-K, any of that kind of stuff. Okay, sounds like your mama was kind of inventive about how she went about trying to get different kinds of exercises for you to do.
Uh, After I was reported to the health department, I'm pretty sure they probably go high quality, but I don't know that.
Right. I bet they did and they probably even communicated with your mother and gave her some ideas of things that she might be able to do. Well, I'm glad you had recovered well enough that you could go to school with everybody. What kind of limitations did you have at school? Did you have trouble walking for long periods of time, or
Well, in those first early grades, once you were in your class, you were pretty much stabilized for the day. So I did fine. I know that when we started moving from class to class, I had no problem.
okay? What part of your body did it affect the most? Was it your legs or your
Yeah.
feet?
Uh, Probably walking was the only handicap that I was well.
Or how did they handle that at school? Like, were you simply not required to do any kind of physical education classes or anything like that?
Well, when you think how long ago that was, they probably,
Recess was physical education. Okay, all right, that makes sense. I don't think we had to start thinking about physical education until kids started having too many donuts and not enough physical activity. You think that's about right?
maybe so.
And they weren't on that farm, so they weren't moving all the time.
Well, we weren't farming, but we lived in the country. We lived up on a part of farmland was our home.
Okay. And I know when I was a little girl, my mama used to say, "Go outside and don't come back till it gets dark." Is that kind of how you were raised?
I don't remember that.
Okay. All right. I think you've already covered this, but I want to ask anyway. You didn't have any brothers and sisters that had polio when you had it, did you?
No.
Okay. Were you ever made to feel ashamed that you had polio, or any reactions from someone else that maybe shunned you or anything because you had polio? Okay, that's great. What about post polio? That's something that I didn't even know existed until we started doing this grant. Have you had some difficulty with post polio? And if so, tell us about it.
I first knew about post polio. There wasn't a clinic in Knoxville. I went to the Home Springs in Georgia,
Oh.
and I was probably in my 30s at that time. I went there for to be seen by a doctor and advised about activities and so forth.
Well, can you describe Warm Springs for us? Because see, this is something that has been lost a whole lot to history. Can you tell us about some about the facilities and things that you remember about seeing there?
No,
Okay.
I don't. I remember seeing some people that were still on Journeys, the movie, but I was already able to walk. In fact, I already was married and had children,
Okay.
so it was. I guess I was pretty active then, so much so that they wanted me to be in a wheelchair from the time I was diagnosed there, and I didn't cooperate with that.
In other words, you said if I can walk, I'm going to walk.
I was already working as a public health nurse. I was an adult, and I wasn't about to give all that up and go into a wheelchair.
Well, that makes perfect sense. Now, how old are you today, Miss Betty?
95.
95. Whoa, you've done well, very well. Did having polio in any way influence your choice of public nursing, you think, or just nursing in general, or do you think you would might have done that anyway?
No, I did nursing because it was available to me through the federal program to get nurses for the Army.
Oh, is
I
this
was in,
World War II time?
okay, and so I was I went to nursing school, and And from that time on, I knew while I was still in school that I wanted to do public health. So as soon as I was able to have my RN certificate, I applied for public health, and I worked with the children a lot of it. Did a lot of polio immunization.
Okay, tell us about that because that's something that, I remember the polio saving Sundays, I think it was, because I remember going to a big school and we were allowed to go play before we went into the school because it was such a long line because there wasn't vaccine hesitancy back then. Everybody just went. I mean, we were asked to go get our vaccinations, so we all went.
Now, what year would that have been?
Probably in the early 1960s, I'm thinking. Somewhere like maybe
I was
61.
in the 60s. I was moved from Jefferson County to Knox County, and we did good winners clinics, and the adults were coming in, kids that had their vaccine, and we were vaccinating adults at that time.
Okay, was it with the Sabin sugar cube? Is that how you were vaccinating the adults, or was it with the Salk vaccine with the shot?
It was a shot. We
Okay.
had CDC had loaned us guns. You could shoot the air without breaking the skin.
Oh, kind of like, it seems like I remember getting TB shots that felt kind of the same way. Would that have been something like that or not?
The TB shots you got were skin pads.
Uh huh.
No,
This was an actual shot.
shot into the muscle.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, I wanted to ask you about public health. This doesn't necessarily have totally to do with polio, but when you came to Knox County, were they very interested in trying to get people to have indoor plumbing at that time, or were you involved in any of that?
No, that
Was
I
earlier?
came to Knox County probably in the 60s, and it was a city.
Okay, so they had already had
Not
their
full.
indoor plumbing then.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know out in Granger County where I live, they were still trying to get the outdoor toilets from being hanging over the creek.
Yeah.
So, of course, now as we know, that was one way that polio became more virulent was as that improved and got rid of the different kinds of diphtheria and fevers and stuff that people had from that kind of thing, hookworms and whatnot. We didn't do a good job with that then because the polio strains got worse, and so we had all those outbreaks in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Well, is there anything you'd like to tell us about your case of polio that we haven't covered?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, Miss Betty, we so appreciate you for doing that. If you'll look right at that camera and show them your pretty face, we so appreciate you for coming and telling us your story of polio.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing with us today.
We're happy to do it.
Okay. Thank you.